Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our session today. Just so you know, we are recording the session. We're doing this so that we can provide a copy to your employer and for subsequent viewing by yourself and your colleagues who couldn't make it today. We don't use this recording for anything else, and we delete it once we've finished. So welcome to our session on debt. What I'll do is we're just going to work through some slides. I will give you some time to add to your workbooks, and I'll give you some demonstrations of some of the tools that you have available to you through the sorted site. So I know that this is not going to be interactive, unfortunately, so we will skip over this bit. Hopefully, if you do have questions, you'll be able to find the answers in the resource material, and I hope that I do cover everything that you need today. So tuia aranga, tuia araro, tuia aroto, tuia afahu, tuia kiti ara ahunga ora, kia whai hua, kia ora, humie, huie, takie. So welcome, and our goal today is to jointly learn from past experiences and from each other, so that we can help get ourselves into a better position financially. So today we're looking at debt, and this session is brought to you by the Retirement Commission. And as a facilitator, I can't give you any advice, but what we can do is give you some tools to help you deal with your debt and get in control of it. So what we can do is we provide you with free, independent and impartial information about money matters. The Retirement Commission aims to empower people in Aotearoa on their journeys to a better retirement by helping them understand their money and how we behave around money and why we do and what influences our decision making. So I can't give you specific advice, but we will talk about what great resources are available to you and where you can find them. We do recommend that you take notes, and you have been, I believe your facilitator has been given you some online notes that you can take, or there's a workbook. And so in either of those, unfortunately, I don't know, hopefully I'll give you enough time to actually do that. And what we'll do now is we'll have a look at what's coming up. So what's coming up, what we're going to do with debt is we've got lots of aspects to it. What we're going to do is we're going to be looking at the true cost of debt, some strategies for you to deal with it, what meeting my commitments looks like, and some goals for the debt. The whole idea is to hope at the end of it is you should be able to get on top of your debt, because it's stressful for some people. And when we think about our attitude to debt, what do we think about? For some of this, it could be we actually ignore it because it's really just too stressful. It's important that we don't get stressed about it, but a lot of the stress that's caused by debt is around not being in control. So when we're thinking about debt, we do need to think about what the true cost of it is. So there could be interest, there could be penalties, there could be some risk, but also there's a lot of emotional impact around debt, and it can affect other aspects of our life. So when we're thinking about debt, for some people, I could ignore it, or I could be completely overwhelmed by it and feel like I'm sinking. It can be very stressful for a lot of people. Some people try to avoid debt altogether because of the bad feelings that it creates for them. However, not all of our debt is bad. And for some people, it actually helps them to partake in opportunities that they wouldn't have otherwise. And a great example of this would be buying a house. there'd be very few of us that could ever buy a house without taking on some debt. But it's just really important to know that when you take it on, that you've done your homework and you're really comfortable with all of the options. So what do we need to consider? There can be lots of things to consider when it comes to taking on debt, and the sort of debt that you're taking on will have an impact on what these things are. Most debt will have some sort of interest. There will probably be some fees. The contracts come and they've got lots and lots of fine print on them, and we all need a magnifying glass, but there's some really tricky stuff that can be in these that you need to be aware of. We need to think about how long we're going to be paying this off for. It's all very nice, the car salesman saying, oh, it's only going to be $100 a week. But if it's $100 a week for the next 10 years, that could be a lot of money. And a lot of things can change in that time period. We also need to think about, are the rules around me being able to get out of this contract early or paying it off early? Are the charges for just ringing up to find out where I'm at with my contract or where I'm at with my loan? Are the risks for me taking on this debt? So what will happen if I don't have as many hours I can work and I don't get paid as much? What happens if I have an emergency and I need some extra money for something else, but then I can't pay my debt? And what's those events going to do to my impact, or how are they going to impact on my ability to repay my loan? What we have next is a little video about one person who did have a little bit of trouble with their debt and their experience for climbing out of it. So I'm going to leave you to listen to this little video from a lovely lady from Petone.
Hi, I'm Francoise, and my husband and I live in Petone, and I guess we've always had debt. It started like 16,000, gradually got bigger and bigger. It sort of grew like mold, and then we're like, wow, yeah. At $40,000, we had 3 credit cards, a store card, and a finance company loan. I just sort of thought, well, enough's enough. So the first step was to sort of sit down, go through all of our debts and work out like a bit of a weekly budget. Once we'd done that, we looked at saving up a safety net, so when things come along, as they always do, we wouldn't have to turn to the credit card. And I've also got these envelopes. This is just a small selection. I have about 9 of them. But so this is my clothing fund. This is a special events fund, so Christmas and birthdays and Easter. And it's an entertainment fund. It's really good because it having to hand over cash, you sort of think more about what you're doing. We could pay it off faster if we just went completely bare bones, but we sort of want to live too. There's some things you have to do that just make life worth living. We want to start saving up a bigger safety net, so probably like 3 months worth of our salary, so that we've sort of got security there. And then after that, so look at making a big dent in our mortgage and just getting rid of that. So it's a long way to go, but it's good to kind of feel like we're in control.
So most credit contracts, when it comes to debt, the longer you have it, the more it costs you, because interest is calculated normally on a daily basis by how much you actually owe on your debt. So paying it off faster is a great way to save yourself money, or and reward your future self with more income, because every dollar of interest you have to pay to somebody else is a dollar that you don't then have to spend. So what sort of things could we think about if we're considering how can I pay my loan off faster? The shorter the term of the loan, therefore the less amount of interest you're going to pay. You may have to do some maths around this, and we may have to look at some, in fact, we will look at some tools on how we can help you calculate what sort of cost and interest a loan will be depending on the length of time you have. We may be able to, as options to get our loan paid off faster, look at options to maybe combine debts into a lower interest loan. So instead of having 5 loans with varying amounts, we might be able to get a consolidation where we just have to pay off one loan and the interest rate is lower. There also might be, if you've got things like credit cards, there might be a promotion by a provider that allows you to switch your credit card balance to a new provider and not pay any interest for 12 months. If this is the case, having a plan to pay it off in the 12 months and save yourself all of that interest may be a great way to get on top of your debt. We could also make some sacrifices, or if we decide that that is an option for us. I had a friend who had a big credit card debt, and what she did was she actually had a look around her house and said, okay, my kids are grown out of all of these toys, what can I do? She set herself up on Trade Me and went flat out to try and sell as many of the things in her house that her children didn't need anymore, or things that there were surplus, some sports gear that they didn't use anymore. And what she did was everything that she sold, she used to pay off the credit card. The other thing that you could consider is what might be something that really appeals to you. You might like takeaways, but being able to say, okay, I'm only going to have takeaways for the next month. I might not have any takeaways, but instead of using the money for that, I might put it towards my credit card. And at the end of the month, let's see where we're at and then reward ourselves for achieving the pay down. The best thing to do, though, and what is always good to keep in mind, is to focus on the end goal. Sometimes it can be really hard and disheartening to think, I'm not having any fun here, but you are paying down debt. And sometimes it's that short-term pain to get a longer gain is worthwhile. But something you do need to do is actually focus on the goal. You might be able to make a free fun list. So instead of going to the pictures or doing activities that cost you money, have a look around in your area. You might find that there are a lot of free things that you can do. You could go to Te Papa or a museum that doesn't cost you anything, but it will entertain the children for hours. There could be around in your area lots of walking tracks. So instead of going to a movie, you might want to go and have a walk, get out in some fresh air, commune with nature. All of these sorts of things are free. And also your local council often will organise things like in Wellington in the summer, they do concerts in the park and in the gardens that are all free to the public, so that you can actually go along and enjoy yourself that way. So again, for short term, that might be a really good option for you to try and save some money so that you've got more to put towards debt. So there are a couple of ways that you can actually attack debt. So often the best thing to do is write yourself a list of all of the debt that you've got and then order it into things like, is any of it interest free? Is it any of it just small amounts that could be paid off quickly? Which ones of those debts have actually got the largest interest rate on them? So what you then can do is have a strategy for how you could potentially pay them off faster. Now, what was going to work for you here is really going to depend on your personality. If you're one of those people that feels motivated by seeing things getting done, you might like to consider doing a debt snowball. If you actually wanting to just, I can stick to a goal and I can see the end goal, you might want to consider an avalanche. So what I'm going to do is show you a couple of little videos that explain the difference between the two. So here are two lovely people from our commission who were going to explain these. So a snowball, what it effectively does is you start off looking after all the small debts first, and eventually you it picks up momentum, because as you pay off one debt, you use the money you were using to pay off that debt to get onto the next one. So here is a nice little video that we've got that's going to help explain that for you.
With a debt snowball, you knock out the smallest debt first, move on to the next smallest, and keep going until you've got the momentum of a snowball rolling downhill, eventually taking them all out. There are two advantages to this. You get the boost of seeing one of your debts disappear sooner, and that sense of progress propels you towards eliminating the next one, and so forth. Much about money depends on how we think about it. And getting on a roll with a debt snowball can really work for some people. And since some of the small debts may be to family or friends, paying those back early can benefit those relationships too.
Now that strategy I have seen used by lots of clients. I spent 28 years working in a bank and working in the lending department, and I saw a lot of clients who successfully used that strategy. So what it did was that as they got less and less debts to pay off, they were actually more in control till eventually they were just down to the one, and all of the money that they'd been using before, where they had a little bit going here and a little bit going there, all was going to the one. And they found it very satisfying and they were successful. The other option is if you understand or you might have some contracts that you can't get out of that you'd be penalised for if you paid them off early. In this case, the next one, which is the debt avalanche, may be a much better option for you. So here's a little video, and this is Kate, and she will explain how an avalanche works.
A debt avalanche is where you take out the debt that's costing you the most first. You start with the high interest debt, like credit cards or a car loan, and as soon as that's taken care of, move on to the next highest interest rate. Rinse and repeat. Financially speaking, the avalanche is a quicker way out of debt since we can save more on interest. It's the most efficient way to repay.
Again, this is a really good strategy if you've got some high interest debt and some that I've got something on an interest-free contract. Getting rid of the interest ones means that you're going to not have to pay somebody else for that money, which is going to give you more money going forward. Now, how can you calculate how much interest you're paying on your debt? In Sorted, we have a calculator on our website, which is on the sorted.org.nz website. It's under the tools section, and we have a debt calculator. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you into the debt calculator so that you can see how it works and give you a little example of how you can save interest when you've got debt. I'm going to make up these figures, but just so that you get an idea of how it works. So on the Sorted site, you'll see our little mouse there, and we're in the tools section and in the debt calculator. So what we're going to do is we're going to get started in here, and what we're going to say, for an example today, we're going to say, okay, I've got a little bit of buy now, pay later, because they're nice and easy. Usually it's only 4 payments. I might have a credit card debt that I've had for a wee while that's got a little bit above me, and I might have had to borrow some money for a car so that I could get to work. So I've selected those 3 and I pop into the calculator. So now what it's asking me is, what do I owe on my buy now, pay later? So I bought myself a really nice set of linen and I put it on this buy now, pay later. I'm not paying any interest on it. It's my first contract, but I am paying weekly and I have to make 4 payments. Oops, not 44, 4. There are no ongoing charges on this particular account because it's my first one. The next one I've got is I've got a credit store card. I had to buy some new furniture because I moved flat, so I borrowed the money and I stuck it on, but it was interest-free. And they said that it was interest-free for 5 years. So what I've done is, that was a year ago, so I still have some time to go, and I pay it at the moment. I only have to pay it monthly, but the minimum repayment they've given me is $72 to pay it off. The account does have some ongoing fees because in the fine print, they don't give you everything for free, and there are some fees that I have to pay annually. and this one's a little bit tricky one, pay annually, and to have the account, I have to pay $30. I'm not planning to use this card again. It was just a one-off purchase for furniture for me. And the last one I've got is the car that I bought to get myself to work. It wasn't a very expensive car. So I borrowed about $9,500 on it, and I've still got most of that left to go. The interest rate on that is quite high. So I need to pop that in there, and I'm paying weekly, and the number of repayments, I borrowed the money over 4 years, and I still have most of those 4 years to go. So I've still got my 47 months. Does it have any ongoing fees? Again, this one, yes, does have an annual account fee that I have to pay. And in this case, it's going to be $80. So we click on the results. What this tells me is, here's my debt calculator. So I'm going to currently, with the repayments that I'm making, I'm going to pay $773 worth of interest on all of this lending. And of course, most of that is the car loan. What it tells me is, gives me a summary of the lending that I've got. So the total interest that I'm going to pay on this, I owe $9,400 on my car. I've got 47 repayments. The total interest over the term of this loan is going to be $773. The total that I'm paying back for this loan is $10,173, which is obviously more than I borrowed. And so it gives you a little breakdown. But what I've done is I've decided that, okay, I can, instead of paying the minimum, I want to pay a little bit extra on my loan. So what I'm going to do is, it's only going to be another $50 a week. But the difference that it makes is it's going to take some cost off my interest. I'm going to have my car loan paid off in 38 weeks. So I've actually dropped quite a bit of time off my car loan, and all of that extra time, those 9 weeks that I've dropped off, they were all the amounts that were being added to my interest. So what it's done is it's saved me over $100 in interest, in fact, close to $120 worth of interest on my car loan, simply by increasing the repayments for that loan by $50 a week. So this is a really lovely tool to let you play around with this with your balances and calculate how you can pay this off and how much interest you can save. Now, it might be that occasionally you actually have some extra money that you can put in there, and you might be able to, for a wee while, pay a little bit more, but then once you've done it, you might end up having to shrink back down to your original repayments. But what it does is it does give you the option to play around with this and understand probably slightly better what you're paying on your debt. What it does though is it gives you a tool and it gives you something to work with. Now, just so that I can get this back to our full little display, I'm just going to have to pop out of here. I know this seems like rather complicated, but just bear with me. And here we go. So once you've got on top of your debt, that feel-free feeling is pretty awesome. A lot of people, when they finally pay off debt, it lifts a lot of things, both emotionally and stress-wise for them. And it's a great feeling to just know that you don't have any debt. But there's lots of sorts of debt. There's productive debt and there's unproductive debt. So if we're thinking about productive debt, what could that be? So, for example, taking out a loan to study so that you can build your skills and be paid more and increase your knowledge may very well be a very productive use of debt. You might find that in your situation, to be able to get a job, you might need a car because there's no public transport to get you from your home to your job in the hours that you need to work. Now, in some cases, having a flash car that's more than what you need would possibly be unproductive debt. But if it's because you need to get to work, that could easily be classed as productive. Any debt that we're taking on unnecessarily for things that we perhaps don't need, that are just a want, or we took on because we hadn't thought about perhaps an alternative way to pay for what we've bought, can often be unproductive. So debt that doesn't set us up for the future generally would be unproductive. So perhaps borrowing to go on a holiday, not necessarily productive. Great for the peace of mind or for your mind at the time and relaxing, but it may not necessarily be productive going forward. It could cost you way more than what it initially did for the holiday. It could be that you're buying an extra set of, or a second car, but you don't use it very often, or you don't hardly use it at all. Another example that we see quite often is people buying sports equipment. So they buy the sports equipment and then it sits in the yard and never gets used. Unproductive debt. If you're using it, it would be used, or perhaps it was a bicycle that you're going to get to work on instead. That would be really good productive debt. But if it's just going to sit in the backyard and not get used, not very productive. So what productive and unproductive is varies between people. For some people, what they would consider to be unproductive would be productive for other people. So when it comes to this is very much an individual choice and depends on your individual circumstances. Things we need to consider here too is also when we're taking on debt is what happens if I miss a payment? Now, when people lend you money, they have certain obligations to you when you borrow money from them. So those obligations are often in the fine print in the loan agreement that you sign. And if anyone's ever had experience where they have missed a payment, there are a few things that are really important to make sure that you keep on top of it and don't get yourself into trouble. First thing we would always recommend is contact the person that you owe the money to. Have a conversation with them and explain perhaps why you've missed the payment, and see if there's anything that they can do to help you going forward to catch you up again. Sometimes circumstances for us do mean that we're not going to be able to meet our obligations, and a lot of the people that lend money are willing to help you as much as they can, because at the end of the day, they would like to get paid back. They don't want to be seen as a nasty person who repossesses your car, leaves you with the debt. A lot of them, what they really want to do is they just want them to have their money paid back, and they want to make sure that you can do it. So they do and can help you to do that. Now, it could be a credit card, it could be a car loan, but if you give them a call, often they will make an arrangement so that you can actually pay it off. Some of the things that they can do as well, and often do, is often is penalty fees and interest when you miss payments. Contacting your creditor and keeping them informed often will be enough incentive for them to waive those penalties for you. And that could be a huge saving of money that you don't need to pay. The other thing is if they don't hear from you and they do send it to a debt collector, not only are you paying their fees and the interest on what you owe them, but you're paying for the debt collector as well. So it's always a good idea to front foot it and get in front of everybody early. So when it comes to meeting my commitments, what can I do if I miss payments? So here we go. Here's a few suggestions. So you can, what could happen if you miss payments? You might get charged extra fees or interest. Again, if you contact the creditor upfront early on, quite often you can get these waived. You could be charged a high rate of interest. Again, a lot of lenders, if you go outside your facilities, they charge you for the extra, and they charge you at a much higher rate for the extra money. There is always the risk of having the items that you've put on as security, having them repossessed. And that, of course, comes along with the fees for the repossession agents as well. You might have asked somebody to go as your guarantor, and a lot of family members do this for their family, but the risk to them and to you is that if you miss a payment, your guarantor might be asked to repay your loan. Now, they may not necessarily be in a position to be able to do that. And what can happen is that you can also potentially damage the relationship you have with someone that's close to you. So again, if you're getting to the point where you don't think you're going to be able to meet your commitments, always a good idea to front foot it and have a talk to the person who's your guarantor or the people that you've borrowed the money from. The lender can always take you to court if you don't pay. This not paying could affect your credit history and your credit score going forward. And this can affect things later on in life, like trying to buy a house, because those credit scores follow you around and are there for 6 to 7 years on public record. So it is always a good idea, if you can, to get on top of any debt that you have. So what are the lender's responsibilities when they're lending you the money? Up front, they actually have to fully disclose to you exactly what you're signing up for. And they have to do it in an open and honest way, and they have to give you the documentation. Now, a lot of that documentation is that very fine print that you need a magnifying glass for. And sometimes it's not written in a way that's easily to understand either. We would always encourage you to, before signing up to a credit contract, take it away and have a read. And if you're not sure exactly what's in it or what it means, go and ask somebody that you trust. Or you could try someone like your Citizens Advice, or you could actually, if there's some words in there you don't understand, pop into the Sorted site. There's a great glossary in there that explains a whole lot of financial terms that you may not understand yourself, but it's very easy and simple English. The lenders also must give you documentation with a lot of these things outlined in it. So they must be responsible. And also, if it's a bank, they must be responsible to be able to show that at the time they lent you the money, that you were actually in a position to pay it back. Now, this works two ways, because they rely on, when you're making an application, that you are honest with what you provide to them as information for them to assess whether you can afford it. But they must be able to show that they were confident that at the time that they lent you the money, that you were in a position and should have been on an ongoing basis able to repay it. So if you're having problems, what the lender must do, they must carefully and responsibly at all times, and treat you reasonably and with respect. They can't come over all heavy-handed on you. And the other thing you need to realize is that if you haven't signed the piece of paper and it's not your debt, you're not responsible for it. The lender must consider a hardship application if you make one. So if you're in a position where you really can't pay it back, you can make a hardship application, and they must consider this. They will have a particular process that they must follow before they can repossess any property. And this includes giving you notice, giving you an opportunity to catch up, having conversations with you. And they're not allowed to act oppressively. If you need more information about this, or would like to read some more about this, you can go to the www.comcom.government.nz. So this is the Commerce Commission, and there's a lot of information there around the obligations of the lender to you. What we're going to look at now is the true cost of debt. So often when we're borrowing money, it doesn't seem like it's going to be, especially if we can put it on the house, it doesn't seem like it's going to make that much difference. It might be that, for example, we've decided that we really need a holiday. It's been a tough 3 years. We've got some equity on in our house. So what we're going to do is we're going to borrow $20,000. The current interest rate on our home loan is 6%. And what we're going to do is we're just going to put this loan out over 20 years. The repayments are not going to be very much. So yes, we can do this. It fits into our budget and everything's sweet. But how much do you think this would cost you if you did this? Do you think it would be A, $25,000, B, another $8,000, so it's $28,000, or C, it would mean that the holiday cost you an additional $14,000, so it was cost you $34,000? The answer is $34,000, and this is that $20,000 being borrowed over 20 years. So here would be another example, and often this is a more common one, where you're buying yourself a new SUV, because boy, these things, especially the electric ones, are really expensive. So if you again borrow the $80,000 to buy it and spread it over 20 years, do you think you'd pay an extra $12,000, A, $92,000, or do you think it's going to bump it up by $24,000, as in B, $104,000, or is that car actually going to cost you $138,000? And is it going to last 20 years? So the answer to this one is the $138,000. And if the car doesn't last you for 20 years, you'll still be paying it off when you go and buy your next one. And that could be quite scary. So what we're going to do is, as we said early on, is the cost of credit is often how long you have the debt for. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take you through the mortgage calculator we have on site so that you can actually have a look at this tool. You may love to have a play around with this. I find it really helpful for a lot of the participants and a lot of the workshops I do, because it gives them a really good idea as to what they pay on their home loan and what the effects of taking on extra debt can do. So to find this, it's on the Sorted site, which is sorted.org.nz. Again, it's in the tools section and it's called the mortgage calculator. So the page looks like this, and here's our mighty mouse again. And what we've got here is perhaps we're looking at a loan for a home. Maybe we're starting out and this is just our first one. We've bought somewhere quite cheap because we are only going to borrow, in this example, I'm going to use, say we're going to borrow, say $500,000. Now this would be a fairly small home loan, especially if you live somewhere like Auckland. In fact, I'd suggest that you probably wouldn't be able to buy a house with a loan just this small. So what we have here is the system will automatically default to a 30-year term loan and an average variable rate of, now this is what we call, also known as floating home loan rates, of 8.33%. So over the term of the loan, for this loan, the repayments would be monthly $3,785. The interest that we pay over the life of the loan over 30 years would be $862,417. So that house, or the total amount that you have to repay for that house, is actually just over 1.3 million. Now, it might be, and what you can often see is when you go to the bank, they automatically go for a 30-year term. But if you were to say, okay, I can actually afford slightly more than $3,785 a month, I can actually afford $1,000 a week, so I'm going to opt to pay $4,000 a month. What this does, and you'll see, is that it still says here it's a 30-year loan, but in actual fact, it's not a 30-year loan anymore. This is a loan that's going to be paid off in just over 24 years now, and the saving is in the interest. It's dropped the amount of interest that you're paying down to 667,000. So the cost of this house has gone, or the loan has gone from 1.3 million down to 1.1. It's actually knocked $200,000 off the cost of this loan, and the repayments went up by less than $300 a month. It can make a huge amount of difference to how much money you have in your pocket at the end of your life. The system also lets you split your loan, because when you take out a home loan, you don't have to have just one loan. What you can do is you could put it over more than one loan. And it might be that what you want is you need some flexibility for some of your loan, but what you want to do is you want to fix the rate on the majority of it. So for example, if we said we're not going to pay off $400,000 in the next 5 years, so what we're going to do is we're going to go, and the lovely thing about the site is it gives you all of the options of all of the banks and all of the different fixed rate terms, and you can go down here and say, look, I want to fix my rate for my loan for the next 2 years. And I like 6.79%. It's better than the 8.83, which is the floating rate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my 400,000 of my loan a 30-year loan at 6.79 for the next 2 years, and the other 100 I'm going to have at the floating rate. So what this does is this will adjust the loan. So what it's doing is showing you it will drop the monthly repayments if we do this, and again it cuts down on the interest, so of the initial having it all one bulk amount. And again, if you say, well, actually I can still afford $4,000 a month, so if I bump up my repayments to what I initially said I had enough cash for, say 4,000, what this does is you'll see that it makes a huge difference to what you pay overall at the end. So this calculator is really, really handy. You can load as many loans in here as you like. You can play around with it. You can say, I want to pay this off over 20 years instead of 30. And the calculator, when you click out of it, will just readjust everything for you so that you can actually see exactly what you're paying. So I do encourage you that if you're looking at adding something to your house, you might say, well, okay, I'm going to put a $20,000, or I bought the car, and instead of paying it off over 20 years, the life of the car is going to be, sorry, it was an $80,000 car, wasn't it? The car was $80,000. It's going to be, I want to pay it off over 3 years instead of over the 20. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it on a 3-year fixed rate. I'm going to make the loan repayments 3 years, and I'm going to knock this down to 20. So 80,000 of this was actually for my car. Now I'm looking at this and going, perhaps I can't afford $5,654 a month. What it would do is it would cut down a huge amount on my interest, but what it means is that this might not be achievable for me. So I may need to continue to lengthen my loan so that it comes down to something I can afford. And it might be that I need to go back and say, okay, I can't do it over the term. But having a play around with this will actually give you a good indication as to what it's going to cost you to put something on the house. So I would encourage you to have a play with this. What you can do when you go into Sorted is you can set up your own profile, which means that when you come in here, you can save your workings and come back and look at them later. It also means that you can compare it. You can set up one and you can compare it to another company. So you can actually play around with this, and it's a very, very useful tool. So I do encourage you to have a go and see if you can get a really good understanding of what that loan of yours is costing you. Sorry, I'm just going to get myself back to the slides. So bear with us. Oops, that wasn't supposed to happen. Rightio. Okay, so that didn't do what it was supposed to. Sorry, one moment. Keep going. Yay. So you might have some goals after thinking about what we've had a little chat to today. You might have some goals that you're going to take away from today as to what you might like to do so that you can get on top of your debt. Now, remember, goals need to be SMART, which means that they need to be specific. They need to be measurable. They need to be achievable. They need to be realistic, and you need to have a time set on them. But your takeaway from today could be something like these 3 goals. It could be that you can do some calculations and read the fine print before committing to any more future credit contracts. And again, as I said, really encourage you to do that, because some of those things in the fine print actually work in your favor. So do have a read of those. It might be that you want to decide that you're actually in a position at the moment that you could pay off an extra $50 a week to reduce something like your credit card, and so that you can get it paid off. One of my previous attendees decided that when they looked at their spending, they're spending a lot of money on coffee. So instead of buying their coffee, in fact, several coffees every day, what they did was they decided to just drink the coffee that the boss provided. And every time they had a coffee, instead of them paying the $5 that they would have to the coffee place next door that made nicer coffee, they put that $5 into a savings account, and then they used it to pay off their credit card. They were actually astonished at how much they'd been spending on coffee and managed to pay off their credit card in about 4 months. So having a plan like that can be very beneficial. It's like a little goal that you might be able to achieve. And it might be that also to have a look at, perhaps if you've got a home loan at the moment, is to go and have a look at the agreement that you've got for your home loan, and maybe just bumping up your loan repayments by, say, $10 a week can make a huge difference at the end of your loan. And most, even if you're on a fixed rate, those contracts probably have somewhere in the fine print that says you're allowed to adjust your repayments by up to 5% per year without any penalty. And a lot of people don't realize it and don't take advantage of it. So do have a read of your loan agreements and see if you can actually do something like that, because $10 a week now may well put you in a much stronger position in 15 years' time, because it can make a huge dent to the amount of debt you have overall. So I'll give you a couple of moments just to perhaps jot down some goals that you would like to do for yourself. One little rule of thumb about debt: you got to pay it back with interest. And the sad thing about debt is it's easy to get into debt, and sometimes can be quite hard to get out of it. There used to be an old saying, once mortgaged, always mortgaged. It doesn't need to be like that. So just remember that when you're thinking about taking on debt, that the salesperson is always going to present you with a monthly repayment that might sound really good and small at the time, but on an ongoing basis, that may not be achievable for you. Consider the additional costs. A lot of those no interest for 5 years or 4 year deals that you see in the shops, when you actually look at the contract, they're not actually free. There is an ongoing fee to have the account. So you might not be paying interest, but you are paying a fee for it. And in some cases, it's actually cheaper just to pay for the goods if you've got them, or perhaps delay now buying them and save the money, because saving the money means that you don't pay any interest. And it means that you're going to be that much better off at the end. Just remember, a salesman's job is to sell stuff to you. They don't mind if you can't repay it. And often they get a commission from the credit company for actually sending clients to them. Now, a lot of things, the reasons they do interest only or no interest loans is that they know there's always a percentage of people who will have a change of circumstances and not be able to pay them off in time, and that's where they make all of their money. It's on the penalty interest for those people who haven't been able to clear them in time of when the no interest period runs out. So that you don't have debt hanging over your head, you might want to consider what are the things that could possibly change between now and the time that this loan is fully repaid. So always make sure that you're taking on the debt for the right reasons and that you've got a realistic plan and you do it and pay it down as soon as you can. Now that's all very, very depressing, but let's look on the bright side. Statistics tell us that almost 2/3 of New Zealanders with credit cards actually pay them off in full every month. So these people don't pay any interest to the credit card companies. So if you use your credit card and have a small limit, this is a great way of getting up to 55 days worth of free credit from a credit card company. But the catch is you do need to be able to pay it off in full, because when you don't pay it off in full, that's when they start charging you interest. But if you're quite disciplined and you don't have a big limit, this is a great way to get free credit. Now, these stats were taken in 2017, and if you've been reading the paper lately, you would see that there has been an increase in people not paying off their credit cards in time, and it does tend to be our younger generation. It's the people between 20 and 35. So just keep that in mind, that having a chat after this today, one of your takeaways might be to have a chat to some of your whānau about how they're managing their money and giving them some tips and tricks and some tools to allow them to get on top of their debt. So in summary, it's always a great idea to calculate what you're paying off in debt and how much it's costing you. It's always good to have a plan and to pay it down as soon as you possibly can. Because paying it off and having that debt-free feeling is pretty positive and awesome. So from today, what will you do today? In your workbooks, you might like to jot down something that you would like to do just as a takeaway of today. It might be that you're going to go home and have a chat to your whānau and see if there's anything you can do to help them with their journey and with money. What you have done already, of course, is been positive, and you've come along and spent an hour at the session to learn about money for you. And there is nothing better than getting some self-education, and I congratulate you all for coming along and spending the time. So for today's session, we do have an evaluation that we would like you to complete. I believe that the evaluation is online and the link to that has been sent to your coordinator, and she will forward that on to you so that you can fill this out. We love to get feedback, and we love to know that what we're presenting and the tools that we have for you are useful and are up to date and are relevant to your situation and helpful. So please do take the time to fill out the feedback form, and we would be very grateful. So I would just like to thank you all for coming along today. Thank you for giving up your time. Thank you for coming with a positive attitude. I know that money can be very emotional for some people, but I do hope, and I'm sure that you will be able to get on top of your debt and be able to help your family and whānau do the same. I do hope that you are able to take these skills into your future and it is a positive experience for you so that you can arrive at retirement in a much better and more positive financial position than perhaps you wouldn't have done if you hadn't come along today. So thank you so much. Kia ora, and I hope the rest of your day and week go well.